Is there anything that you would like to comment on in terms of, how you're differentiated from others in the market? I will say that, yeah, our perspective is that there aren't many firms out there that do what you do, right? Specifically towards transactions, being able to come in at ad hoc, understand what you're looking at from a healthcare perspective. So there's a lot that I could say that's positive, in particular about the interactions we've had and the successful transactions that we've been through together. But where can you speak to where you feel there's a major differentiation in your services relative to others in the market?
Yeah, I think because we're a healthcare firm. We work with all types of healthcare entities. At least I do individually, and so I think that gives us a lot of experience that you wouldn't otherwise find with other CPA firms. We prepare Medicare cost reports, for example. So if you're working on it with a skilled nursing facility, we understand the MDS and everything that they're going through, right? Everything that they're seeing. Whereas a typical CPA firm probably won't know what a cost report is. So that kind of value, I think we bring to the table, and that experience. And the other thing I'll say is this: the other way that we can increase the value to a client on a transaction will be on the tax side. I can't tell you how many times we've come across a client who post-close come to us and say, "Oh, can you prepare my taxes? I just closed on a transaction, and now I'm retiring." And we look at the deal and said, "Oh man, if you would have done this, you would have saved this much in taxes. But it's too late now. We can't unring the bell, right? The deal's closed."
Right.
And so, knowing and having the ability to look through those agreements and work with our clients, I think we add a lot more. Once you agree on a number, then you have the tax consequence, right? So if we can minimize those taxes, that's going to bring a lot more money to the table too for them.
Yeah, we have constant conversations through a process about, well, what's the implication of the taxes for this, right? And there's so many pieces. I would say the closing statement is another big part of it for us, right? Where there's an accounting that has to happen at the end of the deal, where it's okay, what did we spend the money on, through this transaction? And, a lot of sellers don't understand the amount of resources and costs that buyers deploy into a process. But, we'll have calls where there'll be 10 attorneys on the phone from the buyer, right?
Yeah.
And they'll be going through compliance issues and, who knows? I mean, let's say that they're, billing at $500 an hour, right? I mean, those are expensive calls, right? And then you have situations where you'll have a Q of E group, right? And they're essentially doing a full forensic analysis of this business, right? And I think there's different tiers by which the buyers will spend money, but they want to know that this client is in it, right? And they're gonna sell this business, and they want to sell it. We don't have earnest money. We don't have escrows for close, right? Sometimes you try to the buyers will try to negotiate a breakup fee, but we usually we don't take that on in our negotiation, so we sort of deny that. But I just think that it's important that we put the right team together on the front end of a deal. You're definitely part of that team. An attorney is part of that team, and maybe a clinical consultant. Someone could also be part of the team. But the beauty of what you bring to the table is that, like you said, you can do cost reports.
Yeah.
And you understand that part of it, right? You understand that the financial compliance components of this, the reimbursement of this, point of sale, and all of the different pathways that takes, and you understand it across all segments of healthcare. So from that standpoint, it's really a valuable service. One thing that has gotten me recently is that and Axial just did a report on this. I thought it was really illuminating in that the deals, you think that the majority of deals wouldn't close in the lower middle market because the buyer changes the rules of engagement, right? Or that there's some kind of renegotiation on something, or the buyer just walks away, right? That the majority that they were saying of the deals that don't close are because of the seller's indecisiveness, right? That seller gets to the point at the end and they haven't really thought through what's going to happen next,
Yeah.
and there's an indecisiveness there, and they sort of step away, or an unpreparedness.
Yes.
So I think that's what we're talking about today, is really, those components of how do you frame expectations and constantly reinforce them along the way, and then also how do you prepare them. I mean, do you feel like that those are the right ways of looking at it in terms of representing the client, as a deal team?
Yeah, I do. I think letting them know what's ahead. What does this road look like, so that they are prepared when these things come up, and they don't, because it's stressful, right? It's a time in your life where, no matter where you are in the process, you're always second guessing it. Should I be selling? Should I even do this? It's constantly going. It's normal, right? It's a normal process, and so I think just having a clear cut path for them, and saying this is what you're going to feel, this is what's going to happen, and this is how long it's probably going to take. I think gives them the assurance they need to get to the finish line.
Hey, as long as it's going to take, clients never like what I tell them.
Yeah.
Why don't can you give your opinion on timing, uh, so they can hear from somebody else?
Yeah, no, sure. So, what we see typically, I mean, look, you know, it's easy to get to a handshake, right? But then once you get to the, now we're going to draft the asset purchase agreement or the stock purchase agreement, that could take, several weeks to a month or two, to get the attorneys on the same page and get that thing drafted up. It might even take 3 months. It just depends on how big the transaction is and what nuances they have. And then, of course, typically when you have an agreement, you have a LOI, you've got 60 to 90 days to do due diligence. So typically you'll do that due diligence, then you'll draft that asset purchase agreement. So you could be 6 months or longer to get to that finish line. And once you have the asset purchase agreement done, then you have a closing date, and you have regulatory matters, right? You have to wait for certain approvals with license changes, typically. So just depends on all of that, but I don't know, 6 months, 9 months it could take. What's been your experience?
Yeah, that's right in line with us.
Yeah.
What our preference has been of late is to say, let's prepare everything before we go out. We had a transaction a couple years back where it took us, I'd say, 8 months to get all the books and records together, prove out what we were showing on EBITDA, and we were very happy with that. The
Yeah.
client took that step in that 8 month process. Someone was involved in. They brought someone internally in to make sure that the financials were in order, and they took that perspective that, hey, we're going to lead this process from the standpoint of our financial performance, right?
Yeah.
And so then when we got to market, we were ready, and then that process took 6 months. But I really don't see, unless it's a company that comes in, and like a pharmacy that's buying a retail pharmacy, or a file buy, or a large strategic that does a quick asset purchase, and essentially just sort of buying the balance sheet, and they've got boilerplate documentation. I really don't think a process is less than 6 months.
Yeah.
And, it's more like you said, it's more like between 6 and 9 months.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah. So those are challenges. I mean, I think the other a part of this is capturing people before they have to sell. And I saw an interesting report about the life cycle of a business, and there's sort of the startup and the growth phase, and then there's a bit of a plateau and it's mature, and it's sort of in that position right there where it's a slightly, that hasn't quite plateaued, but it's mature enough where, hey, this is a business that we know we can rely on these numbers, we know we can rely on the performance, we've got the personnel, we've got all these key components in place. What you don't want to do is get too deep into that part of the life cycle and have to sell because some some, who knows, some environmental issue happens or something happens within the business, right? And so I think that the other thing too, Doug, is the life of the operator after the business, which is that this business has been their heart and soul. They put so much into this, and when you have in a market like now where there's inflationary issues, where we could be seeing more and more recession type indicators. Do what do you how do you work with clients to in many respects, healthcare is the best place to be, right?
Yeah.
If as an industry, but how do you work
Still
with
there.
clients? Yeah. Do you sort of, we always say, hey, forget about the noise. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
What do you want to do? What are your expectations? Do you tend to take that approach as well in terms of how you're managing their financials?
I do. We talk about that often. I've seen clients who, essentially ran out of cash and like, okay, I got to sell this tomorrow, and all of a sudden they want to rush to market and try and sell it. And you don't have time. It's too late.
Mm-hmm.
And so we typically talk to our clients as early as possible. We do some wealth management as well, and financial planning, wealth, retirement planning. And so those conversations will come up, I want to sell in a couple of years, that kind of stuff. And, and I always advise my clients, look, you want to start sooner rather than later, because let's assume you want to sell in 2 or 3 years. Well, we just talked about the fact that the whole transaction is going to take 6 to 9 months. So let's just round it to a year, right, to get the deal done. And that doesn't include the marketing and getting a buyer to the table. That's once you get the buyer to the table. So let's say it takes a year to sell it. Typically, the buyer is going to feel better if the seller is going to stay on and do a transition for some period of time. And that could be, months. It could be years. They might want an employment agreement for a year or 2 years. So I think the earlier you have those conversations, the more flexibility you have. It's not as if you have to turn the key as soon as you decide to sell it and walk away because you're not ready yet. You can certainly structure a transaction where, hey, I'm still going to be around for 3 years, but I think now's the time to start the process.
Right.
We need a succession plan. Let's get that thing going. I'll work for the buyer for a year or two, and then I'll retire. That kind of stuff. I think that's much better now than waiting till And I've seen this happen too, where we're beyond our retirement age, and we're going to work as long as we possibly can, and then a health issue hits, and man, you're just trying to dump it because you don't have time. And that's a terrible situation to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. We just need the client to give us a clear objective for themselves. If they say 5 years, I want out, and I want, and I want this is where I'd like my life to be. These are the situations I'd like to be. We're in the world of, it's not necessarily just selling businesses. It's sort of getting capital, right?
Yeah.
Like where are we going to find capital out there? Yeah. And I think that's another thing, is that they go into this thinking that there's only one way to do it, which is this, I'm putting something on, in the offering table, and someone's coming in and giving me a bid for it, right? And there's a lot more than that can go into it. There's, as you said, there's transition plans, there's employment agreements, there's operating agreements if you're part of the equity structure going forward. And so these, on top of the timing of that and being prepared for that, it's also a matter of, if you have an expectation, let's try to figure what that is now, and structure around that, and look at the likelihood of that. But I have really found that anyone that comes and is prepared, that is willing to sort of take the right guidance from experienced advisors, tends to usually almost always find and reach a level of success in their process. It might be different from what they start off with, but it definitely is in line with what we would consider a win for them and where they want to be in their lives. So yeah, I think it's these are valuable pieces. Doug, look, I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to close with, but if there was anything in particular that you wanted to emphasize, but please, we want to make sure that we're informing people of the importance of your participation in a process. And in that regard, I mean, if there's anything we've missed today, would love to hear, more about it, or in some sort of conclusion.
No, I appreciate that, Andre, and I think we've covered it pretty well. I think you provide an amazing service to your clients, and I just want you to know, from the bottom of my heart, I'm really thrilled to be a part of your team. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, thanks, Doug. Doug, why don't you leave us with your coordinates, just so if anyone watching wants to reach out to you, they know how to
Sure.
get hold of you.
Yeah, and by the way, just mention that you're on Andre's team, and we're not like a taxi cab where the meter starts as soon as the phone picks up. So if we can answer any questions, we're happy to do it. Just give me a call. My direct number 941-756-0700. And then my email is my first name, Doug, DOUG, @waltersaccounting.com.